Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. The silence of the woods used to be my sanctuary, a thick, ancient quiet that pressed in from all sides, insulating my small cabin from the jagged noise of the world I'd fled. Here, nestled deep in the Maine wilderness, miles from the nearest paved road, I'd come to heal, to write, to simply be after everything. Arthur Vance, author of moderately successful existential thrillers, now a hermit whose only company was the rustle of leaves and the occasional shriek of a distant owl. It was perfect until it wasn't. It started subtly, as these things always do, a whisper at the edge of perception. The first night, a cold, clear night with a sky like spilled ink, I saw them. Pinpricks of light, too bright for stars, too steady for planes, tracing impossibly smooth arcs across the firmament. I blamed satellites, a trick of the atmosphere, my own overactive imagination. I'd been writing late, fueled by strong coffee and a desperate need to silence the echoes in my head. Fatigue, I told myself, could make a man see anything, but the lights returned, not every night, but enough. Always silent, always observing. They would hover, sometimes, over the distant ridges, glowing with a soft, pulsing luminescence that seemed to vibrate through the very air, a low-frequency hum I couldn't quite hear but felt deep in my bones. It was a pressure, an unsettling awareness that something vast and unknowable was out there, beyond the comfortable boundaries of my world. Then came the dreams. Vivid, terrifying tableaus of sterile rooms, of long, impossibly thin figures moving with an unsettling grace. They never spoke, but their presence was a scream in my mind, a symphony of intrusion. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs, convinced I wasn't alone. The cabin, once my fortress, felt suddenly permeable, its walls paper-thin against an unseen gaze. I'd grab the old 30-6 I kept for dear, clutching its cold metal stock, scanning the shadows that danced in the corners of my vision. Nothing, always nothing, just the silence, now heavy with a new, oppressive quality. I started leaving the lights on at night, a string of bare bulbs casting a weak glow around the perimeter of the cabin. It was foolish, a beacon in the vast darkness, but the thought of being completely enveloped by the night, unseen eyes watching from the deep woods, was unbearable. The electricity was temperamental, flickering, sometimes dying altogether for minutes at a time. I'd trek out to the generator, cursing the old machine, but the hum of the engine wouldn't always explain the strange way the interior lights would pulse, like a dying heartbeat. The radio, usually a source of comfort, old blues, crackling news reports, became a torment. Static, hissing, then bursts of what sounded like garbled voices, not human, not animal. A language of clicks and hisses, like insects speaking in binary. I'd twist the dial, frantic, trying to find a clear signal, but it was always there, a phantom frequency, a chorus of alien whispers burrowing into my thoughts. I finally smashed the radio, the sudden silence almost as alarming as the noise it had produced. My sanity began to fray at the edges. I found myself talking to myself, arguing with the creeping paranoia. "It's the isolation, Arthur," I'd mutter, pacing the cabin floor. "You're a city boy, never meant for this much quiet. Your mind's playing tricks." But even as I said it, a part of me knew it was a lie. The feeling of being observed was too persistent, too visceral. It clung to me like a second skin. One morning, I found a precise, circular indentation in the frost on my truck's windshield. Too perfect for a bird, too shallow for a stone. It was as if something had pressed against the glass, something with a large, smooth, utterly featureless surface. I stared at it for a long time, my breath fogging the air, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Then I touched it, and the frost simply vanished, leaving no trace. I started noticing patterns in the woods, not the random scatter of fallen leaves or the natural chaos of untamed growth, but deliberate arrangements. Small stones placed in perfect spirals, thin branches woven into intricate, unsettling symbols I couldn't decipher, but instinctively understood were not natural. They were signposts, I thought, a language I couldn't read, a map leading to somewhere. Or perhaps more chillingly, they were markers designating me. One afternoon, venturing out for firewood, I stumbled upon a clearing I'd never seen before, though I'd crisscrossed these woods for months. In the center, the trees were arranged in a perfect circle, their highest branches stripped clean of bark, leaving pale, skeletal fingers pointing skyward. The ground within the circle was strangely smooth, devoid of undergrowth, covered in a fine, almost metallic dust that shimmered in the weak sunlight. A palpable silence hung in the air, a stillness so profound it felt like a scream. I felt an undeniable urge to step into the circle, to touch the dust, but a more primitive instinct, cold and sharp, seized me. I backed away slowly, my eyes darting, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I didn't run, for fear of drawing attention to my terror. I walked deliberately, casually, until I was out of the clearing, then I bolted, not stopping until the rough-hewn door of my cabin was slammed shut behind me. I locked everything, double-checked the latches on the windows. It was absurd. What good would a deadbolt do against whatever created those lights, those symbols, that chilling silence? But the act itself was a ritual, a pathetic attempt to reclaim some semblance of control. Days blurred into a terrifying monotony. Sleep offered no escape, only more vivid dreams that felt less like dreams and more like fragmented memories of conscious experiences. I saw myself, or a version of myself, floating, tethered by unseen forces, my mind filled with images of complex machinery and strange, shimmering instruments. I felt a cold touch on my skin, a gentle pressure that wasn't gentle at all. I found marks on my body, small, raised bumps on my left forearm, arranged in a perfect triangle. A faded, almost imperceptible scar behind my ear. I didn't remember injuring myself. I wasn't prone to sleepwalking. These marks felt new. I tried to ignore them, convinced they were insect bites, a rash, anything but what my mind screamed they were. The external world began to echo my internal unraveling. The air grew heavy, oppressive, even when the sky was clear. The scent of ozone, sharp and metallic, occasionally filled the cabin, though there was no storm. The birds, once a constant chorus, vanished. The woods fell utterly silent, a profound, unnatural hush that only amplified the frantic beat of my own heart. Then the static returned, but not from the radio. It was in my head. A low, persistent hum, like a swarm of angry bees trapped behind my eyeballs. It made my teeth ache, my skull throb. I pressed my hands to my temples, trying to push it out, but it only intensified, a pressure building, until I thought my head would explode. One night the hum was deafening. It resonated through the floorboards, through the very foundation of the cabin. The lights flickered, not just the cabin lights, but the battery-powered lantern, the emergency flashlight I kept by my bed. Every source of illumination in the cabin seemed to be on the verge of dying. I huddled in the corner, rifle across my lap, watching the windows. The moon was a sliver, barely piercing the thick canopy, but there was a new light, a diffuse glow, emanating from the woods. It pulsed a slow, deliberate rhythm like a monstrous heart. The front door, which I had bolted, rattled once, twice, not a knock, more like a tentative probe. I held my breath, every muscle tense. Then a sound, distinct and utterly terrifying, floated through the thin walls. It was a sigh, not human, not animal, something vast and ancient, a breath of pure vacuum, resonating with that persistent hum. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands over my ears, desperate to block it out. But the sound wasn't external anymore. It was inside my head, a disembodied voice whispering in a language of pure terror, each syllable a shard of ice in my mind. "We are here, we see you." My rifle felt useless, a child's toy. What could a bullet do against something that spoke in my thoughts, that moved lights in the sky, that etched symbols into the earth? I looked up. The window, which I had latched, was slowly, silently swinging inward. A sliver of impossible light spilled into the cabin, a cold, clinical blue that made the familiar objects of my home look alien, distorted. And then I saw it. Or rather, I saw the absence of it. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, silhouetted against the blue glow. It was just outside the window, utterly motionless. No discernible features, just a dark, elongated shape, a silhouette against the impossible light. But I felt its presence, a profound coldness that wasn't just physical. It was a chill on my soul, I stumbled backward, tripping over a stack of books, landing hard on the floor. My rifle clattered away, my breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't scream. The fear was too immense, too complete to be contained by a mere sound. The figure didn't move, didn't enter. It just stood there, watching. And then, slowly, a second figure emerged from the deeper shadows, then a third. They were not human. Their forms were too attenuated, their movements, when they finally came, too fluid, too unnatural. They glided rather than walked, their feet never seeming to quite touch the ground. Panic, raw and unthinking, finally took over. I scrambled to my feet, my legs like jelly, and threw myself against the back door, tearing at the bolts with trembling fingers. It was pointless. I knew it was pointless. But the instinct to flee, to survive, was a primal scream in my gut. The door burst open, not by my hand, but from an unseen force, tearing from its hinges with a splintering groan. I was flung backward, hitting the far wall with sickening force. My vision swam. Through the haze, I saw them. Two of the figures were now inside the cabin. They moved without sound, their long, impossibly slender limbs reaching, stretching. Their heads were large, egg-shaped, with no discernible mouth or nose. Only the eyes. The eyes were vast, black pools, reflecting the impossible blue light, and they held an ancient, terrible intelligence. They were not malicious, not angry. They were utterly indifferent, like a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. And I was the specimen. I tried to fight, to yell, but my body was unresponsive. A paralyzing fear had rooted me to the spot. The hum in my head intensified, vibrating through every cell of my body, dissolving my will, my thoughts, into a formless dread. I felt a cool, metallic touch on my forehead, then on my chest. It wasn't painful, not physically, but the invasion, the utter violation of my personal space, of my very being, was a scream in a silent universe. My vision blurred, the blue light engulfing everything. I felt myself floating, rising not through the air, but through some unidentifiable medium. The cabin receded below me, then the trees, then the entire forest, shrinking into a miniature landscape. The earth became a swirling marble, then a distant jewel in the black velvet of space. I remember the cold, a cold that bit deeper than any winter chill, a cold that seeped into my bones, into my very soul. And the silence. A silence so profound it was the loudest sound I had ever heard. A silence that hummed with 1,000 unspoken questions, 1,000 alien observations. Then, nothing. I woke up in my bed. The morning light, pale and weak, filtered through the dirty windowpane. The familiar scent of old wood and pine needles filled the air. My head throbbed, a dull ache behind my eyes. I pushed myself up, my muscles stiff and sore, as if I'd been wrestling with a ghost. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The stack of books by the wall, the half-finished manuscript on my desk, the hunting rifle leaning against the hearth. The front door was latched. The back door, I noticed with a rising terror, was firmly shut, its bolts still in place, no splintered wood, no sign of forced entry. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face. My reflection stared back at me, haggard, eyes bloodshot, but otherwise normal. No strange marks, no signs of injury. It had been a dream, a terrifying, elaborate, hyperrealistic nightmare born of isolation and a frayed mind. Relief washed over me, so potent it made my knees weak. Then I saw it. On the back of my right hand, near the knuckles, was a faint, almost invisible mark. A tiny, perfect triangle no larger than a pinpoint. 3 infinitesimally small punctures arranged with geometric precision. It wasn't a scratch, not a bug bite. It was a signature. My relief curdled into an even deeper horror. The dream had been a memory. A partial, fragmented memory of an event my mind had tried, desperately, to sanitize. I walked through the cabin, my feet heavy, the silence now an unbearable weight. I touched the walls, ran my hand over the door frames. They were solid, real, but the reality felt like a thin veneer, a stage set. I was back, but I wasn't. My gaze fell upon the calendar tacked to the kitchen wall. I distinctly remembered it being October 12th when the terror began to peak. Now the date read October 28th. 16 days. 16 days of my life were gone, blotted out, erased. I tried to recall what I had done during those days, Had I eaten, slept, written, there was nothing. Just a vast, echoing emptiness, a chasm in my memory where those days should have been. I walked outside, blinking in the weak sunlight. The air felt thin, sharp, almost metallic. The trees stood sentinel, their leaves now a riot of red and gold. The clearing I'd found, the one with the skeletal trees and shimmering dust, I searched for it, walking for hours, but it was gone. Or perhaps, I realized with a fresh wave of nausea, it had never been there at all. The woods were silent, utterly, unnervingly silent. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, even though a faint breeze stirred the branches. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a profound, hollow void. I returned to the cabin, the sense of unreality pressing down on me. I tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. My mind felt like a vast, empty room, echoing with an unheard hum. I stared at the blank page, then at my hand, at the tiny, perfect triangle that was not a part of me, yet was undeniably there. I am back in my cabin. But the cabin isn't quite the same. The air is still, but it feels charged, alive with an unseen presence. The shadows in the corners are deeper, more knowing, and I am not the same. My thoughts are no longer entirely my own. There's a constant, low thrum beneath my consciousness, a faint, alien static. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see fleeting images of impossible geometry, of sterile rooms bathed in blue light. Sometimes I hear the whispers, not in English, not in any language I know, but a pure, unadulterated thought, an instruction that I can't quite grasp, but feel compelled to obey. I picked up my pen, but my hand hesitated. My own stories suddenly felt trivial, meaningless. The world I knew, the reality I had inhabited, felt like a cruel joke. I was a puppet, a ghost, a shell of the man who had sought solace in these woods. They had left me here, yes, but they hadn't truly let me go. I was a vessel, perhaps, or a lingering experiment left to ferment in my own dread. The lights in the sky no longer filled me with terror. They filled me with a quiet, hollow understanding. They were always there, and now so was I, forever watched, forever changed, a permanent echo of their presence, forever listening for the hum, waiting for the next blank space on the calendar. And I wondered, with a chilling certainty, what they would come back for next. What part of Arthur Vance was still left to take?